Hello, this is Bill Bullard with R-CALF USA, the voice of the independent cattle producer in the United States of America. Well, last week I was reminded of an old movie. It was titled The Jerk, and in it, comedian Steve Martin went berserk upon the arrival of the new phone book. He jumped around exclaiming that the new phone book is here, the new phone book is here. What reminded me of this movie scene was last week's White House announcement of a new trade concession for beef delivered by the European Union. It was an agreement by the European Union to increase the tariff rate quota, or TRQ, on non-hormone beef to 36,000 metric tons over 7 years. To be fair, the arrival of the new phone books was a good thing back then, though questionable as to whether it was something to get excited about. And so it is that today's expansion of the market access for U.S. beef is a good thing. Though like the phone book, the arrival of this limited expansion is hardly deserving of all the hype that the beef packing lobby has created. And here's why. Beginning in the 80s, which is when the EU experienced its outbreak of BSE or mad cow disease, the EU banned the importation of hormone-treated beef. In 1989, the U.S. exported about 12,000 metric tons of beef to the EU. U.S. beef exports increased through the 90s, and in 1998, the U.S. exported nearly 55,000 metric tons of beef to the EU. Interestingly, in 1996, that was the year the National Cattlemen's Association merged with the major beef packers to form the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. And this new and more powerful beef packing lobby convinced the United States to complain to the World Trade Organization, or WTO, that the EU was violating the sanitary and phytosanitary agreement by refusing hormone-treated beef. The cattle producers that later formed R-CALF USA thought this was an unusual reaction, as it contradicted the golden rule of business, which is to give your customers what they want. The EU's request for cattle produced a certain way could have been viewed as a niche market for U.S. cattle raisers and U.S. packers to produce beef that met the EU's request. But rather than give the EU customer what it wanted, the beef packing lobby instead tried to force the EU to accept beef produced the way they wanted to do it. And it used the newly formed WTO as leverage. This leverage was used to ensure that no upstart company would become more profitable by producing beef the way the EU wanted, while the biggest beef packers remained focused on capturing more and more of the generic beef market through mergers and acquisitions. And recall, this is the same scenario that played out in the 2000s, when a then upstart company wanted to test for BSE in order to meet the import requirements of Japan. The beef packing lobby pushed hard, and with the help of USDA, they prevented Creekstone Farms premium beef from meeting Japan's requirements. Again, this was an effort to ensure that no upstart company would become more profitable by actually producing beef the way the customer wanted. As the dispute between the beef packing lobby-led U.S. and the EU carried on, exports fell to only about 10,000 metric tons in 2000, and then rose to over 40,000 metric tons by 2004, but only to fall again to under 13,000 metric tons in 2006. Interestingly, in 2003, when I met with the European Commission in Brussels, their leaders asked me why it was the U.S. was not taking advantage of the tariff rate quota that they had established for beef from the United States. They surmised, as I did, that the U.S. beef packing lobby was trying to prevent companies from taking advantage of the niche market that the EU had created. But the entrepreneurial spirit of the U.S. slowly overcame the politics of the beef packing lobby, and producers and smaller beef packers began expanding production of non-hormone treated cattle, and exports to the EU's niche market have been increasing since 2007. By 2016, those exports increased to over 24,000 metric tons. So in addition to all of this, here's why the EU's 7-year 36,000 metric ton TRQ is hardly something to write home about. 36,000 metric tons of beef is roughly the equivalent of 130,000 head of cattle. In June of this year alone, we imported over 150,000 head of cattle from Canada and Mexico. The new TRQ does not require the cattle from which the beef is derived to be U.S. born and raised cattle. So it's entirely possible all of the increased quota can be filled by packers that source cheaper non-hormone cattle from Canada and Mexico and slaughter them here in the U.S. Yes, the phone book is here, but what we really need is country of origin labels on our U.S. produced beef. Thank you and goodbye.